Rocksteady Sebek is Blackbeard's father. Yet, despite how much of a bombshell this reveal was, most One Piece fans had seen this twist coming for years. Ever since Sebek was first introduced, practically everything about him was connected to Blackbeard, and One Piece was already a story full of these types of secret family reveals. In retrospect, Sebek being Blackbeard's dad was obvious from the start. In fact, many would say that it was too obvious. Eiichiro and his team have gone on record saying that they want One Piece to be a very unpredictable story. This is actually one of the things One Piece is most famous for, where many of the series' biggest moments are actually twists that no one saw coming. How One Piece has for years managed to be so unpredictable is often achieved through one simple storytelling device: misdirection. Just take a minor character like Bonnie as an example. In chapter 565, she has a scene crying over the Summit War. This one panel for years led fans to theorize that she was possibly connected to Ace or Whitebeard, as the entire war revolved around these two characters. Yet, this was actually not the case, but it was hundreds of chapters later revealed that the one she was crying for was in fact Kuma, who was actually her adoptive father, which was something pretty much nobody saw coming. This is however hardly the only example like this, and One Piece is full of moments like this where fans are led to believe something, only for it to be a ruse, and for the real twist to be something completely unpredictable. So, even though Blackbeard being Sebek's son seemed obvious, it is exactly because of this that fans for years thought it was another red herring, and that the manga must be setting us up for something far more unexpected. Now that Sebek has been officially confirmed as Blackbeard's father, however, the fan reaction to this twist has been very lukewarm. While Sebek being finally shown in the flesh is one of the biggest moments of One Piece in 2025, most fans are genuinely not surprised by the twist, and the consensus is that pretty much everyone saw this coming. This, however, arguably speaks to a big issue One Piece has been having lately. Has the story simply become too predictable? Sebek being Blackbeard's father is the third big character reveal of this arc, where it was preceded by both Shanks being confirmed to have a twin brother and Gabam being revealed as the man with the straw hat. Just like with Sebek though, both of these twists had been predicted by fans months or even years before they happened. But more importantly, this has arguably been the case with most of Elbaf's big twists so far. Imu's connection with Kunko, Loki not being Harald's murderer, Elbaf's big tree being the Adam tree, and the God's Knight's weakness being Conqueror's Haki, were all things correctly predicted by fans. Not to honk my own horn too much, but in chapter 1155, it was also confirmed that Sebek knew about Imu, and that Kunko was the woman we'd seen in Imu's butterfly room, both of which were twists I'd correctly predicted on this channel months before they were revealed. So in actuality, Sebek being revealed as Blackbeard's father is just a cherry on top, and this whole arc has been full of moments the fans had been able to correctly predict well in advance, to a point where even Eiichiro himself has commented on this topic. A few months ago, Oda reportedly said that he actually did not like his fans theorizing about his manga, where he apparently thought they were in effect spoiling his twist for other readers. This became a major internet controversy, where several of the bigger One Piece channels commented on this, and one of the biggest Japanese One Piece YouTubers even quit their channel and personally apologized to Oda. In reality though, Oda's supposed comment was, at least in my opinion, very much blown out of proportion, where it was genuinely nothing more than a casual remark in a text chat to one of his friends. If you're interested, I'd suggest checking Ohara's very thorough video breaking down what was actually said. Still, even if Oda not liking fan theories was a topic that was blown out of proportion, it does still raise a very good point. One Piece fans have by 2025 genuinely become incredibly skilled at correctly predicting the story. If you were a weekly reader of the Elbaf arc, and also someone who consistently followed the fandom, your reaction to most of the arc's twists wouldn't be, "Oh, I had no idea that was coming," but it would instead be something like, "Hey, this is that thing those fans were talking about." However, I'm just going to go straight to the point with this. I do not really think this is a problem. Personally, on the list of things I enjoy about reading One Piece, the story being unpredictable honestly ranks very low. When it comes to twists, I think what is far more important than unpredictability is whether the twist actually makes the story more interesting. I think a good example of this is when Kaido was revealed to have a dragon devil fruit at the beginning of the Wano arc. In case you weren't still a fan at this point, Kaido being a dragon had for years been the most popular theory for his devil fruit before this reveal, as it simply connected so many previous hints about his character. Just because Kaido being a dragon was predictable though, I do not think this made it a bad twist. There being a literal dragon devil fruit was at this point in the story a complete game changer. It allowed the manga to show us things we'd never before seen in One Piece, and Wano as a whole would have been without question a lot less interesting if Kaido had not been a dragon. Genuinely, this is also how I felt about most of the twists we've had so far in the Elbaf arc. Even though I'd personally made videos on this channel predicting things like Shanks having a twin or Kunko's connection with Imu before they happened, I genuinely do not think this took anything away from my enjoyment when these moments actually happened. Just like with Kaido being a dragon, the reason why these twists work, at least in my opinion, is not because of how shocking they are, but because of how much they add to the story. Shamrock's introduction genuinely just makes both Shanks' character and the Celestial Dragon faction way more interesting, while Imu literally coming down on Elbaf raised the stakes for this entire arc. So really, while these twists likely did surprise many readers, I'd argue that surprise was never their true value, but that these twists simply made the story better. When it comes to this twist of Blackbeard being Sebek's son, I am however still on the fence whether it even is a good idea, and I think there's a good argument that it could make both the story and Blackbeard's character less interesting. I have personally never been the biggest fan of One Piece having so many secret family reveals. Just looking at something like the East Blue Saga in hindsight, Luffy by pure coincidence ends up meeting and recruiting people like the descendant of Sword God Ryuma, a son of an infamous Yonko officer, and the Prince of Germa, while Luffy himself is also revealed to be the son of the worst criminal in the world, and the grandson of the most legendary marine in history. While these revelations did in many ways add to the story by introducing new characters and creating new storylines, the issue I have is that when so many characters are revealed to be of legendary descent, it just makes the One Piece world feel so much smaller. I think there is however an even bigger risk with Blackbeard being confirmed as the son of Sebek. Teach clearly has a lot of reverence for his old man, as he literally named his flagship the Saber of Sebek. It could very well be that everything Blackbeard has done in the story is simply following in his father's footsteps, but this runs the risk of Blackbeard simply becoming a character with a lot less agency. If you ask me, a big thing that makes Blackbeard so interesting is just how much of a maverick he is, where he's willing to do things completely outside the box to achieve his ambition. If it is however revealed that Blackbeard's ambition isn't actually even his own, or worse, that he is simply following a plan laid out for him by Sebek, I genuinely think this would make Teach a more boring character. This is also a genuine concern, as One Piece has already repeatedly done this with some of its biggest villains. However, I think there's likely not much reason to be concerned about Blackbeard. If Sebek really died 38 years ago at God Valley, this would mean that Teach at that point was only 2 years old, which would mean that due to childhood amnesia, Blackbeard would have no recollection of his time with his father. So really, it is still possible that Sebek was still just an inspiration for Teach, and that all of Teach's plans and experiences are the fruits of his own labor. Interestingly, I think this revelation could also give a possible reason as to why Blackbeard liked Ace so much. Before their fight, Blackbeard was actually happy to see Ace, and wanted him to join his crew, and in the post-time skip, Teach specifically sent Burgess to Dressrosa to get the Mera Mera no Mi, because he thought it would be like having Ace on his crew. While the only confirmed Whitebeard pirates who knew that Ace was Roger's son before the war was Whitebeard himself, if Teach also knew, he could have seen Ace as someone very much like himself, a son of one of the most infamous pirates in history, someone whose mere existence was a crime, and someone who'd had to hide who they really were from the world. What is also interesting, and perhaps even a bit questionable, is that Whitebeard never seemed to connect the dots about Teach being Sebek's kid. The two look extremely alike, and on top of this, Teach was also conveniently a member of the D clan just like Sebek. Yet, in the flashback scene where we see Whitebeard recruiting Teach, he makes no note of this, and later just refers to Teach as a normal crew member when talking to Roger, rather than as the son of Sebek, which I'm sure would very much interest Roger. I suppose it makes sense that Whitebeard didn't connect the dots, however, as he was also surprised when Ace revealed his parentage to him. Whether he knew or not about Teach though, I also do not think it would make a difference, as Whitebeard very much believes that sons do not carry the sins of their fathers. One final thing I'd like to bring up about Sebek is that him being revealed as Blackbeard's father, I think really builds up Shanks and Blackbeard's connection. They've now been both revealed to be children of extremely important lineages, but they're also people whose lives were very much shaped by the God Valley incident. I also feel like we're very discreetly being set up for the revelation that not only their fathers, but their mothers were also extremely important characters. In case you do not know, Shanks and Samrock do not have the same hair color as their father, and Shanks' birth has now been given even more importance, with Kaban referring to him as the child of destiny. Likewise, Blackbeard's mother seemingly came from another branch of the D clan called the Marshall family, and the Gorosei have already confirmed that unlike Teach, Sebek was not able to eat multiple devil fruits. Personally, I genuinely believe that when the manga is all said and done, Shanks and Teach will literally be two of the absolute most important characters in the whole story not named Luffy, surpassing Imu, Joy Boy, Roger, and literally everyone else. I'm still not sure how to exactly feel about Harald based on these last two chapters. He's definitely a unique character, but his transition from a ruthless warmonger to someone who wants to reform Elbaf was extremely fast and pretty much went over in the blink of an eye. It is however really cool to actually see a character genuinely succeed in transforming their nation, where Harald in many ways is what I feel Oden would have been like if he had gotten to be shogun. Even though they might at a first glance seem like backwards barbarians, this flashback has also shown that the Giants of Elbaf are actually a really innovative culture, and this also really goes for Harald, where it's revealed that he's the one personally behind Elbaf's branch system. Much of Harald's knowledge, however, clearly came from him traveling the world. He actually reminds me a lot of a real-life historical figure, Tsar Peter the Great, who traveled to Western Europe and brought over a lot of their knowledge and technology back to Russia. This is actually why the current-day Russian flag looks so much like the Dutch flag, where it was actually the creation of Peter, who really liked the Dutch flag's design and wanted Russia to adopt it. This flashback, however, also shows the price Harald had to pay for his constant traveling, where it meant that he was also an absentee father, and wasn't always around to take care of Loki and Harald when they were being mistreated. This doesn't mean that Harald is a bad person, and we even see that Elbaf would have literally starved if he hadn't brought over the other countries to help the island. To me, for the lack of a better word, this just makes Harald a very human character. He's trying to do what's best in a world with no perfect choices, and this is something that just happens frequently in real life, where people with a lot of responsibilities sadly tend to be neglectful parents. What I will say though, is that Kaban is still clearly the GOAT dad of One Piece in my eyes. It's also really interesting that even after trying to reform Elbaf for years, Harald still didn't tear off his horns, but apparently only did this later in his life. I think this might be connected to his upcoming partnership with the world government, where something clearly happened that made Harald decide to completely pacify the Giants. I think it is also really interesting that not all the stories we've heard about Loki are false, where he genuinely did terrorize Elbaf in the past and was being a bad brother to Harald. It makes sense in context, where Loki is ultimately just a sad kid who was never loved by his mother or his people, and is simply venting out that pain on others. Some of the implications here, however, do paint Loki as a very dark character, where he possibly murdered his abusive foster parent when he was just a kid. One small point I want to bring up is that I do not think he is being literal when he says that he cannot die. I think Loki is simply one of these characters like Oden or Big Mom, who's born with a freakishly tough body, and we pretty much already saw this with him being able to climb back from the underworld after having just literally been born. Speaking of Big Mom, I am rather disappointed we got no new information about her time on Elbaf in this chapter. The fact that we skipped over this also all but confirms that Mother Caramel was a solo operative, where the Giants likely had no idea she was selling their orphans to the government. However, I am fairly certain that Big Mom will still play a role in this flashback, where we have a whole storyline unexplored about Loki falling in love with Lola, and Big Mom almost getting her alliance with Elbaf. There's also the thing Goldberg mentioned before in this arc, where his dad apparently tried to kill Big Mom at some point in time. Naturally, this will also be set up for the manga in the present story, bringing Big Mom back as the true main villain of this arc. No doubt about it. There's so many things I'd still like to discuss about these 2 chapters, but I really just have time for one more thing, which is Elbaf's Galela band, a group of legendary Warhammer-wielding giants who'd possibly been captured by the world government. Here is actually my idea, which is that these giants will likely play a role in this very flashback. We know that Loki at some point ventured out to the sea, and seemingly became an infamous pirate in his own right. We also know that there's a lot of bad blood between Loki and the government, which could very well go beyond them just having killed Sebek. But most of all, we still have no idea where Loki got his Ragnar hammer from, where he didn't have it as a child, and it seemingly didn't belong to Harald before him. Connecting these dots, I think Loki might have personally later sought out and freed the Galela band from the government, and basically made them into his very own pirate crew, and that they in turn made the Ragnar hammer for him. I am however not sure what the possible connection between this company of giants and Water 7's Galela is, other than that Galela also have the same Viking team that we've now seen in Elbaf. It really could be something as small as Iceberg having decided to honor Elbaf's best shipwrights, or it could go even deeper, where Iceberg could have literally met those giants and learned some of their skills. For the record, I think Jarl's story about giants trapped in ice is not related to these shipwrights. If I were to guess, this is more likely to be related to Oars, where he apparently hundreds of years ago literally ruled over his own evil nation, and Moria eventually found him locked in ice, which fits perfectly with Jarl's words about the giants having in history been the enemies of the world. And yeah, Kiku in the cover story is finally confirmed as the daimyo of Ringo, but more importantly, we're introduced to an unknown hero of Wano who was apparently originally born in the West Blue. This character also likely died a long time ago, as their shrine appears to be a bit of a ruin. The identity of this hero is actually incredibly hard to figure out, and it could very well just be a new character, where we're clearly setting up West Blue's greater importance to the story with both God Valley and Brook's original backstory. For an absolutely wild idea, maybe this hero is literally Moria, as we know he was born in the West Blue, and conveniently, seemingly knew that both Ryuma's corpse and sword would be located in Ringo. It's an incredibly crazy idea that Wano country would see Moria of all people as a hero, and even more crazy that Moria possibly grew up in Wano, but it's not impossible, as we already know that the people of Wano actually had no idea that Moria was the one who later defiled Ryuma's grave. I'd still go with the theory that this is a future character we're setting up, but I just couldn't resist throwing this Moria curveball here. A huge thank you to all my members for sticking by me in this inactive period. It's been over a month since my last upload, so I really appreciate the loyalty, and this also goes to all longtime viewers who aren't members. I hope you can forgive me for the lack of uploads. Other than that, thanks for watching this video all the way to the end.